This episode is brought to you by Windrose Recovery, a family of premier addiction treatment programs in southeastern Wisconsin. Privately owned, Windrose Recovery offers a full continuum of personalized care for those struggling with addiction, including the Manor for residential treatment, Midwest Detox for inpatient detoxification, and Windrose Counseling for outpatient treatment. With highly personalized treatment focused on trauma, Dr. Chantel Thomas and her expert team offer an authentic experience, creating the kind of deep emotional change that's crucial for long-term recovery. If you or someone you love is struggling with addiction, call Windrose Recovery at 414-409-5300. You can learn more about Windrose Recovery by clicking the link in the show notes or by visiting windroserecovery.com. Thank you for listening to The Path to Authenticity. My name's Tom Gentry. I think of the show as the opposite of small talk. You'll hear real conversations with real people who know who they are. We talk about what makes them who they are, how they became who they are, and how we might become truer expressions of who we are.
Live on the road.
My name is Brian Phillips, and this is The Path to Authenticity.
Nowhere to run, nothing to hide from the government's prying eye. Take yourself a summer holiday.
The Path to Authenticity proudly supports the iSpeak Media Foundation, advancing media literacy education through an evolving series of outreach programs within the communities that need it most. For more information, visit ispeakmedia.org. If this is your first time here, thanks for checking it out. If not, thanks for coming back. I'm Tom Gentry, and this is The Path to Authenticity, episode 146 for October 19th, 2021. For this one, I dug back into the archives for one of my early episodes with an artist named Brian Phillips, who lives near Austin, Texas. And what I love about this episode is that during this conversation with Brian was when I knew this podcast was going to work. You know, when I started this, I wasn't so sure that my idea for how I would have these conversations and the tone that the podcast would take on. I wasn't so sure all of it would come together the way I envisioned. But I knew during this conversation with Brian. Super nice guy. He ended up doing a little painting for me and sending it to me a few months later. But it's a great conversation and a good example of the types of conversations I want to have on this podcast. So I will say, as I did in the episodes with Lucia a couple weeks ago, the sound quality of the show has improved a lot since I did this recording. I've gotten better with the microphone. If you listen closely, you can hear me banging it around a little bit, and I'm kind of breathy. So forgive that, but the content I feel really good about. So here you go, Brian Phillips.
Nowhere to run, nothing to hide from the government's prying eye. Take yourself a summer holiday.
I emailed you earlier today about the questions that I wanted to ask you, And one of the bits of feedback that I got, I always ask people if there's anything else I haven't mentioned that they'd like to talk about. I thought maybe a good place for us to start would be, you mentioned about how you feel about reclaiming materials and just the state this world is in right now with how everything is just regarded as so disposable.
Right.
Where do you come in with that?
Well, you're definitely right. And I guess once I started using salvaged wood probably about 15 years ago. And it was simply out of boredom. And I had a pile of like really small scraps at my first house that I bought, and I was making some shelving or something. So I was just looking at these scraps and said, I wonder if I put those little scraps together, if just do a painting on top of it. And that's how all this started. And then it made me realize how much I do see out at the trash and how much stuff I drive by and disregard it just as trash. But once I really started going, kind of stopping and looking at these pieces, I really kind of was locked in on, this nice patina of the paint and just years and years of coats of paint and nail holes and wood knots. And it was just all beautiful to me. And then it just kind of hit me that instead of painting over all this stuff, let that energy shine through in my work and let it kind of do some of the work for the color, in my pieces. But it kind of just made me realize we do live in a world that throws away material that could easily be remade, reused or repurposed to make something, either, affordable housing or art or birdhouses or bird feeders and mailboxes. Like it just goes on. And it doesn't stop with just wood. I mean, metal and plastic. And it's just, like you mentioned, it's just a throwaway world. And it's sad to me because these are valuable resources that with just a little bit of creativity and imagination, you can make something very cool and very special with stuff that was heading towards the landfill.
Well, and myself, I'm not really an artist. I write, but
it's an art.
Yeah, absolutely it is, I guess.
Right.
But in a past life, I was a carpenter. My dad ran furniture stores. So I did some of that stuff when I was selling furniture and I've always kind of known furniture and you go into furniture stores now. I mean, you really have to spend a lot of money to buy something that's well built, and almost nothing you see is well built.
Correct.
And so almost everything I have in my house, almost every piece of furniture is something I either got at a Goodwill store or out of somebody's garage from Craigslist. I've found some really cool pieces of furniture that just needed cleaned up. They just needed not even stripped down, but maybe just wiped down with
Murphy's wood oil.
Yeah. There's all kinds of ways to do it. I mean, the desk I'm sitting at as I record this it sat in somebody's garage. It's an Ethan Allen roll top desk, and it sat in somebody's garage for 15 years. And it just boggles my mind. I think we're probably about the same age. And I'm sure you can remember, like, if your TV was broken as a kid, like either a guy came and fixed it or you took it somewhere and it got fixed. You know?
Exactly.
And it was unusual to buy a new TV. And now it's just like your TV goes on the fritz and you throw it away and go buy a new one.
Yeah, it's out on the curb.
You can't even get parts for stuff. You know?
Yeah, it's sad.
So now, how do you describe the work that you do aside from the materials you use? How do you prefer to make art?
It's always a tough question when people ask me that because I didn't go to school for art, so I'm not really studied on all the, genres of art. But my friend Abby Daniels kind of put it in a way that I was like, yeah, that's a good way of saying it. But she said, your work is pretty Americana. And that kind of word kind of encompasses, I guess, most of my styles. So, I mean, I guess I would put it in that vein, or pretty graphic. Like I've always been interested in graphic design. So a lot of my stuff is pretty, clean lines and, graphic images. So,
well, and I noticed
it's a mix of old and new.
Yeah.
So.
And you use interesting typefaces for lettering.
Yeah,
I've noticed. And, I think some people might call it folk art.
Yeah. It definitely leans towards folk art.
But it's also, I don't know, in my mind, a little more refined than what I would typically think of, but still fun. It's like not the least bit stuffy. It's really a lot of fun.
That's a compliment when people say that. So thank you.
Yeah. And, I was trying to think about how I found you. I know I started following you on Instagram at some point, and I think, I love music, and, it seems like you do too. And,
absolutely.
And I think, I don't know if, I worked for a company in Nashville for like 5 years. So I would be up there a lot, entertaining people and stuff. And I'd take them out to the honky tonks where everybody knows all these old George Jones songs. And, and it just, I kind of caught the bug for that. And I think I was actually out in your neck of the woods last summer for a few days for a wedding. And I'm just wondering if I saw one of your stickers out there or something. I think that's what happened. I went to a show at Green Hall.
Okay.
And, I think I saw something like that. The George motherfucking Jones sticker.
Right.
Yeah.
And you could have seen it at Dino's in Nashville too, because they have one on their cash register, but that would be an awesome story if that was how you found me.
I think it is. Okay. And,
well, that's great.
Yeah. I don't know if it was at Green Hall or not, but, it was somewhere, I was all around San Antonio and Austin for a few days. Yeah, no, I think, I saw that sticker and I wanted one, right. and I think I Googled you and found you and then started following you on Instagram and
the story behind that sticker, if I can real quick.
Yeah, absolutely.
But, my wife and I, our favorite bar was the Horseshoe Lounge here in Austin, and we used to go there and they just had all they was beer. And they had just, this great old jukebox. And so I would play, my usual 20 songs every time we would go in there and just sit there and drink $1.75 High Life beers, And I remember just one night we were sitting there and I was like saying to my wife, so I was like, I fucking love George Jones. And then it just came out later, George motherfucking Jones. And that's how that sticker started. Yeah. And because it was kind of a play on Waylon Jennings' old t-shirts that he used to sell, like back in the 70s, that said Waylon Goddamn Jennings. So that's how that happened. And then I thought it would be way, very ridiculous to do Hall and motherfucking Oates stickers. So.
Yeah, that's right. I saw that.
So just making people laugh with those that's all I'm after,
Yeah,
so it's cool to know that that's how you found my work.
Yeah. And then, so I found that, and then I saw the different, you have a lot of swag that you sell too, aside from the pieces of art, but there's the stickers and koozie that say, what do they say? US grade A, some bitch.
Right.
So then, I don't know if you remember this or not, but I ordered one of those, the koozie and the sticker. And then I went back and I ordered one of those koozies to send to my brother in Kokomo, Indiana.
Yeah.
And now did you tell me you're from Indiana?
Well, yeah, I lived in Indianapolis for 15 years, but I grew up in Ohio, but I did live in Indianapolis for 15 years, which is 20 minutes from Kokomo.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, we did, I had a couple friends live in Kokomo and teach in Kokomo. And, so I'm familiar with the area for sure. So small world.
Do you know the hip hugger?
Well, I wasn't going to mention it. You mentioned it. So, but I'd never been there. I'd only heard like folklore about the hip hugger. So.
Yeah, well, it's funny because the Hip Hugger is the strip club in my hometown of Kokomo, Indiana.
Yeah.
And it's funny because I live in this condo in downtown West Palm Beach, and there's some young families, and like soccer moms with running around with little kids and stuff like that. And I got to talking to this woman in the hallway. She's running around with her 2 little boys. And somehow I told her I was from Kokomo, and she's from Fort Wayne. And I said Kokomo, and she says, "Oh, the Hip Hugger." And she's like this is like a 35-year-old mom, who knows the Hip Hugger. It's kind of a legend. If if anybody's been through Kokomo, Indiana, they know about the Hip Hugger.
Yeah, you're absolutely right.
Which is it's a great name for an establishment, I will say. It's a really good name, but not the greatest place in the world.
No. That's probably why I never ventured out to it.
Yeah. So what did you do when you were in Indianapolis?
So I'd grown up in this little farming community in Ohio, and I kind of just wanted out of the small town setting. So my friends were considering opening up a club in Indianapolis. So I moved over there when I was 25 they wanted me to, or offered to have me help them kind of paint the inside, kind of psychedelic, but that never even panned out. So I managed a screen print shop for 10 years on production floor, and then decided I wanted to get out of production, and my boss gave me a shot to move into the art department and learn the computer programs and stuff. So I took him up on that, and then did that for another 10 years. So I was in the screen print industry for 25 years.
Well, that makes a lot of sense. Looking at your artwork, that adds up definitely. And that's another one of those things that just that really doesn't exist anymore, does it? I mean,
what
screen printing?
Oh yeah, it's kind of bigger than ever now.
Is it?
But the reason I wanted out of it because it's so competitive that there's pennies, just cutthroat, and not a lot of, you can make a decent living, but it's not the career it used to give people, know?
Yeah. Okay. So it's
kind of a stepping stone to something else.
So then how did you end up in Texas?
So I met my wife when she lived in Chicago. I still lived in Indianapolis, and met my wife through one of my friends that was really good friends with her, Stephen Dabbage, and then we just hit it off, and we did the long distance thing for a year, and then she moved down to Indianapolis with the understanding that we wouldn't stay in Indianapolis, and I had been looking to get out of the Midwest my whole life because I absolutely hate winter, and she said, "Have you ever considered Texas?" And I was like, "Not really, not my thing." And she said, "Well, let's go check Austin out. I got some friends there." And I said, "Well, I got some friends in Austin, so let's do it." And once we got down here, just like everybody else in the world that comes to Austin, we were like, "Sure, let's move here."
Yeah.
So she grew up in Houston and Corpus Christi, and so she was ready to come back to Texas. And once she brought me down here, I kind of felt like she had helped me find my place in the world, because it's just kind of a organic fit, everything is just, how I like it down here. I like heat, and and the, everything you want in nature is here. You got hills and snow if you want it, and, beach and everything else across the board. So, and everybody's been very, very nice since we moved down here. So,
well, and that's something I was about to say, because, having also grown up in the Midwest, I guess the cold was part of me wanting to leave, but I moved to South Florida in 96, and, there are a lot of great things about living in Florida and West Palm Beach, you know, it's a beautiful area, palm trees everywhere. You can't really complain about that, but
Right.
it's the people, you know, it's not like being in the Midwest. And that's what I have missed from the Midwest. And, and just being out there, I've been to Austin 2 or 3 times over the past 6 or 7 years. And then this wedding I went to last summer, people are just nice. You know, they go out of their way to be nice to people. And
it's a genuine nice, like
it is.
Growing up in the Midwest, and my wife still tells this story. Like, I had to tell her, like, this cashier at this gas station asked how my day was going, and I really think he meant it.
Yeah.
And she was like, that's Texas. Like, that's Southern hospitality.
Yeah.
And I'm, you know, I've been blown away by how nice everybody is down here. So it's kind of nice being in a place where I'm not looking for the next place to go. Like, I'm here to stay. That's
good. Good for you.
It's a good feeling.
So you settled in Austin.
Yeah. And
is it I take it it's a thriving artistic community there?
It is. Like, there are so many great artists in this city, but to be honest with you, it's tough to make a living as an artist in the city. I'm very fortunate. People do buy my work, and I'm, you know, able to pay my bills and everything. But there are next level artists that I just don't think are getting recognized because the art scene really hasn't peaked, or the art representation aspect of the city hasn't really peaked, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
But Houston and San Antonio and Dallas, their art scenes just seem to be like more accepted, and like people support the arts a little bit more. Austin has some great organizations like Big Medium that really help local artists get their name and their work out, and they put on events that help us build our audience and get our work in front of eyeballs. And so there's a lot of great things going on in this community, but I think it can only get better. And I think it's only going to get stronger. But the arts community itself is some of the greatest people I've ever met in my life. You know, we all take care of each other as best we can. And coming from the Midwest, it was a lot more competitive and a lot more territorial.
Yeah.
And down here, everybody just seems like open arms. You know, let's all help each other because that's how we're going to succeed, you know. And I love that vibe, you know.
Yeah, absolutely. So, what was your childhood like? Do you have any siblings, or?
I'm the youngest of 4. My mom raised all of us by herself, and I have 2 older sisters and an older brother.
Are they all still in Ohio, or spread out? Or?
My one sister's there with my 2 nieces and their children, and then my other sister and nephew live in Georgia, and then I have a niece that lives in Pensacola, and my brother lives in Georgia as well. So we're all pretty spread out.
So everybody left, or yeah,
for the most part, yeah.
Yeah. Now, you mentioned, I saw in your bio on your website that you mentioned that, you know, the one thing that could keep you focused as a kid was crayons and a drawing pad.
Yep.
And so it kind of started, how young were you when you started to?
To be honest, that's like, you know, one of a few of my first memories is just always having, you know, those big, drawing pads that are just newsprint, you know, the cheap ones. Yeah. I remember her having, you know, one of those with us at all time with, you know, probably a cookie tin full of crayon.
Right.
And, you know, even at parties, she would just set me down and I would just start coloring away and drawing and stuff. And it's really, it's come full circle because in my early 20s, I had a deep depression, and it was, you know, suicidal thoughts and all this. And luckily I reached out for help, and And my therapist was the first thing she said, if you have a hobby, get back into your hobby and, keep a journal and all that. And so I immediately got back into art and, and I had done art, through high school and stuff and really loved art class and stuff. But, after you graduate, it was, took a back seat to paying bills and finding work and all that stuff. But, looking back on my childhood, that was probably my therapy because we moved around so much, I always had art to fall back on, to get my mind off stuff. And even, now doing art full time, I tell people it's very therapeutic for me to sit out there and be able to release all my creative energy, however I feel, feel like doing it that day.
Mm-hmm.
And it's very fulfilling and sometimes frustrating, of course, but it's a form of meditation that sometimes I take for granted, and I need to remind myself to get recentered and focus and realize how lucky I am to be able to, meditate on my work every day.
Yeah. Wow. That's so at what point did you connect the dots that it was, like a meditative experience for you?
I guess it's always been in the back of my head, but when it really hit me was when I started doing the most recent peyote series with all the intricate patterns and just random freestyle patterns in the animal shapes.
Mm-hmm.
It's hard for me to explain it if you're not looking at a photo, but just kind of mapping out these little shapes on these animal animal forms. That's when it kind of locked me in, like, oh wow, I just spent 4 hours painting without basically looking up. That was totally like I was when I was a kid, because you would just lose yourself for hours in your art, But, to be honest with you, like a lot of the aspects of what I do leading up to the little salvage wood canvases that I paint on, is great for me to think it through and always try to figure out a way to do it better the next time or recreate something in the same vein or, I always try to figure out how to do something better,
Mm-hmm.
And, so that's my way of kind of exercising my brain.
Yeah.
So, but I got to say the patterns that I just kind of free form and kind of go for it are really satisfying mentally.
So this whole podcast, it's, I wanted to take on the topic of personal authenticity.
Yeah.
And if we really get to our essence, that childlike energy
Mm-hmm.
that we all possess. And, really, what I've learned in my experience in life is that what it's really about is unlearning all the things we've been conditioned to do and to return to that childlike state. And if you get a chance, go back and listen to my first episode. It's with this woman named Lucia Capacchione. And she's the person who developed the concept of the inner child and doing inner child work. And it's all artistic stuff. And she talks about, she talks about how even as a little kid, she became very, very ill.
Mm-hmm.
And the only thing that healed her was her art. She kept journals and drew in them and painted and that's what really kept her on track in life. And she's had the same experience in adulthood. She had an illness in the 70s that, they really didn't know what it was. They couldn't figure out what it was, but she was like almost near death at one point. But,
wow.
that concept of creative healing has become her life's work. And
that's awesome. Yeah. I can't wait to listen to it.
I talked to her for like 2 hours. I've known her for many years. And so the first episode was the first part, and then the second part's going to come out, a week from now when we're recording. So yeah, check it out. I mean, and you know, this is really the first time we talked, so I really haven't told you anything about myself, but I'm a substance abuse counselor and a recovery coach, and I write, and I mostly work with men, and you know, really all these struggles that we experience in life, like addiction, to me, it's really just about losing our identity, losing track of who we are, or never owning our identity in the first place. And so, you know, if we can, when you need to heal emotionally, when you're, and I believe like most addiction is really self-medication in some way, shape or form. Yeah. Yeah. But you know where it's at really is getting back to who you are as a human being, or just, you know, really, you know, if you're happy, if you're doing what you're supposed to do, you know, life's going to work out a lot better for you and you're going to be a lot happier.
Yeah. And once it happens for you, you want it for everybody because you see the potential and the possibilities, and you see how far of a dark black hole you crawled out of. You want to spread the word, and you want to yell it from the mountains. And that's why I talk openly about having suicidal episode, simply because it shouldn't be taboo to talk about it. I want people to hear, you know, other people talk about it and say it's okay to reach out and talk to somebody about it, because it's completely normal. And I made a decision not to keep it a secret, because it's not something I'm embarrassed about. It's something that I want to help others realize that there's nothing to be embarrassed about.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that it means a lot to me to hear you say that, just because, well, first of all, I mean, I've experienced a lot of suicide in my life. My childhood best friend committed suicide on the first day of our senior year in high school. Oh, somebody else in our senior class did it a week before that. So that year just started off like that. Wow. And then, I had 2 or 3 other people over the course of a few years who I was friends with and who did it. And, all guys. Yeah. None of them knew how to talk about what was going on with them. Right. They were sad and they didn't know how to talk about it.
Yeah. When you get that sad, it's very confusing, and you don't think other people will understand what you're going through. Yeah. And you don't want to burden them with it.
Right. And I think in my experience, with that kind of stuff, there's also like a sense of, shame that we take on. Like, I'm not supposed to be this sad. Like there's something wrong with me for being this sad. Yeah.
Man up.
Right. That's another, the man up thing is,
and it's not just men, like, of course, but, I don't think our society does enough to educate and accept, mental health education in all aspects, not just depression and anxiety, but also stress. Work creates stress. Stress creates sickness. If you don't take care of your mental health, and it's a vicious circle that I think we could easily work on and have a very positive outcome, Yeah. And I'm preaching to the choir, because you do counseling and substance abuse, counseling, but I know you hear the worst of the worst, and you're out there helping people. But I think as a society, we need to teach our kids that it's okay to talk about your feelings and your emotions, no matter how deep they are, without judgment. And
well, and one of the things I've learned is And, you know, I stumbled into this because I'm a recovering alcoholic. I mean, and by the time I was 23 years old, I definitely drank enough to last me a whole lifetime, you know, and it was, you know, it had to end. And, and so I came down here to get help. I had a sister down here, and it just, you know, everything kind of fell into place, and I started to, you know, I went to a really great place. I ended up working there, and here I am like 22 years later, still doing it, but good for you, man. That's a great story. But you know, one of the things that I've always been told, and I've definitely experienced, is that this whole personal growth thing, it's really like unpeeling an onion. It never stops.
Yeah.
It never stops. You just keep going increasingly deeper, and you know, all the wounds that we have, if we're in touch with our wounds, then we can use them to help other people with the same wounds, which is what you're talking about. That's what you're doing. You know, the fact that you're willing to be open about it and talk about it, because, you know, most, especially men in our culture, it is really taboo to talk about emotions at all.
Right.
So that's awesome.
And going back, not to change the subject.
That's okay.
But when we were talking about, you know, artwork as a child and how it was kind of our escapism, you know, as a kid, unknowingly, we didn't say, I'm going to draw it so I can just kind of lose track of time. We just kind of ran with it. And that's the beauty of it. But I do tell people my first break in art was when I was about 10 or 11 years old. And me and my mom were staying in this battered women's shelter in Columbus, Georgia. And I was the only kid and staying in the house. And so I was bored and just drawing at the coffee table. And this lady comes up and she was like, "What are you doing, honey?" And I said, "Oh, I'm just drawing my favorite wrestlers, the Road Warriors." And she goes, "Oh, can I see it?" And I said, "Sure." You know, I was just a kid that was excited. You know, a stranger wanted to see my artwork. And she goes, "Oh, this is great." She goes, "Do you mind if I show this to my friend?" And I was like, "Sure," you know. And a week later, my mom and I had already, you know, moved back to our house. And I get a phone call. And she said, "Man, this is Rose Ward. I'm Fred Ward's daughter." And Fred Ward was the wrestling promoter in Columbus, Georgia. And she said, "We would really like to print your drawings in our wrestling programs." And my first question to her was, "Can I get in free?" So I always tell people that was my first, I guess, the first time I realized I could, you know, get something from my art.
Yeah.
And to know something, you know, that cool and good came out of something like such a bad situation is, you know, always something I'll carry with me, because art has been there for me, you know, through and through. So I did want to share that little story.
All right. Not to change the subject, but I got to ask you. So are we talking about Georgia Championship Wrestling?
Absolutely.
Oh my God.
The early 80s.
Oh my God. Ric Flair, this is pre-WWF.
Yes. It was territory wrestling, and it was just the best.
Yeah. And Wildfire Tommy Rich.
Yes. So I got to meet a lot of the wrestlers too.
Oh my God.
Because they would call me like a month in advance and say, "Can you draw?" You know.
Oh, so it became a regular gig?
Yeah. So
my gosh.
I did about 10 drawings of, you know, very popular wrestlers down to people that some people don't remember, you know, like the Hollywood Blondes tag team. And, you know, I did Ted DiBiase and David Von Erich. And so it was very cool to be called and, you know, at that age,
As a
we called and
10-year-old?
somebody requested a, drawing, and and they would always post my name, like drawing by 12-year-old wrestling fan Brian Phillips,
That's
so I would
cool.
and I used to make replica belts out of cardboard and glue, costume jewelry that I would buy at the flea market.
Oh my
I would pop the little gems out and glue them into the plates, and
you were serious about it.
Yeah, and I really wish I would have kept those through the years. But
Now you got to do something.
Yeah,
you got to do a wrestling belt piece.
Oh yeah, well it's in the works. So, because Ric Flair was one of my favorites, and the world championship belt that he held, multiple times, the 10 pounds of gold belt is something that I wanted to replicate, because I did do that one in cardboard.
Mm-hmm.
So my friend Tim Kerr and I are collaborating on a Ric Flair piece.
Oh, that is so cool.
That is in progress. So and my wife keeps trying to push me to do a couple wrestling themed pieces too. So yeah. I do need to pay my dues and give it back to them.
I love that, man. It's so cool.
Thank you.
Yeah. So, now I noticed you have some installations, in some places, right?
Yeah. Facebook headquarters here in Austin asked me to do one down in their downtown headquarters.
Is that one of the wooden state of Texas pieces?
No, this one was it was one whole wall of an elevator lobby. It was a 25-foot wall, 12-foot high. And, basically it was just salvaged cedar boards, and it's a black and white abstract piece that basically was inspired by Dazzle camo, of the old warships in World War One. And if you Google Dazzle camo, you come up with these like warships that look like they're photoshopped, but they used to paint these geometric shapes on them so the enemy couldn't. It was before sonar, so it threw off the enemy's perception of how fast you were approaching.
Okay.
When my friend told me about that, I kind of did some research, and I was like, oh man, this is very cool. So that style of abstract was basically inspired by Dazzle camo. But I also do have, several Texas pieces up. I have an 8-foot up at Salt Lake Barbecue here in Driftwood, Texas. And the cool thing about that piece is that's a, Texas barbecue institution basically. And I was ecstatic to be asked by them, because that was the first restaurant my father-in-law took us to when we moved to Texas.
Oh, wow.
But they had me go out to each barn and salvage all the wood from their property. And so it all had a history of, being a part of the ranch or part of the restaurant at one time. And I got chased by a turkey vulture when I was picking. So there's a lot of cool stories about that, but, it was to commemorate their 50th anniversary. So I thought that was such a great idea to not just use salvage wood, but to use wood that has the history and energy of being on that land for 50 years, That's cool. Yeah, it was great. And, there's a couple other X pieces. I don't know if you want me to go through them or not.
Sure. Why not?
There's, a couple in Town Suites hotels, one in Fort Worth and one here in Austin. And then there's also another 6-foot Texas piece, at I think it's a private dormitory at Texas A&M up at College Station, Texas.
Cool.
But I'm, always looking forward to what next, what kind of installation can I do next? Because the Facebook one was definitely a step out of my comfort zone, but to see it at that scale was pretty.
Yeah, I'm sure that was gratifying.
yeah, it was awesome. So, and I got to give Facebook credit to trust. They hire artists to go in and do installations rather than just buy a piece of their work and hang it on the wall. So they trust the artist with their vision, and, they take care of them, and it just helps us, be more creative in the next project. So
yeah, it was, that's probably one of those things that used to happen a lot more than it does now.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Like, Diego Rivera stuff and the public buildings, and
totally.
And I know Mark Rothko had a big commission in some restaurant in New York City at one time, and
yeah, you see a lot of Miro in Spain, and I'm sure there's a lot of Picasso in Spain, and you're right. Like, the public art used to be for the public, and in some cities, I'm sure it's still thriving, but you cut the budget, and what's the first thing to go?
Yeah.
But it's still out there, and I got to give credit to people that are still keeping it, going too.
Well, I'll tell you, where I live, in downtown West Palm Beach, over the course of the last 5 or 6 years, I guess, I mean, every time I walk downtown, there's another building with a mural on it. I mean, there are just murals everywhere.
Yeah. I love it. Yeah. I think it's great.
Yeah, it is. It's really cool. And there's some of them that have kind of become iconic that some people will always go get their picture taken at, or
sure. Yeah.
But, and they have like a commission that has planned it and everything. It's really cool. This is a pretty artistic place too. There's some really good arts high schools here, and
good.
I mean, I don't know if you know Palm Beach, but Palm Beach is kind of like a vacation spot for, a lot of wealthy people. And so I actually, one job that I had many years ago for a short period of time was at an art gallery doing installations, hanging the gallery and all that. But it was like the real deal. I mean, like real modern art,
Right.
Hanging Picassos and Chagalls and stuff like that. It's crazy. For a kid from Kokomo, Indiana, to be doing that was.
I'd probably lose my shit and drop one of them.
It blew my mind. Yeah.
Yeah. Pardon my language.
No, it's okay. I figured from the get, I'm going to have to give this the explicit tag.
Right.
But that's okay. Yeah, we were talking about George motherfucking Jones.
Yeah.
Well, so what's next for you?
Oh man, we just welcomed a puppy into our world. So that is kind of teaching me a lot about myself right now.
What do you mean when you say that?
We love her, but it's been so long since we've had a puppy that we
forgot how much work they are.
Yeah, it's just constant work, and it'll all be worth it. And she's going to be, she is a stellar dog, but she's a puppy. So we're just, we're training her, and we're ready to get to that point where she can calm down so we can unwind at night and have a calm setting.
Yeah.
And instead of just needing constant attention and
what kind of dog
play.
Is she?
She's a shepherd. Yeah.
Okay.
We're German shepherd people.
Wow. So,
but her name's Lulu, and she's great. And we have a 4-year-old as well, but, Indiana Sweetcorn, and she's been a huge help on the training.
Her name's Indiana Sweetcorn?
Yeah, my wife named her.
Oh my gosh. Does your wife love that Indiana Sweetcorn?
Well, you got to admit it. You can't get it down here.
No, or not in Florida either. Yeah, I mean, unless you've lived in Indiana, you really don't know about Indiana Sweetcorn, but it's definitely a thing.
Pretty great. So,
yeah, it is. It's good stuff. And you can just go to vegetable stands and buy it in the summer.
On the road.
Yeah.
And most people would be on the road buying it. And, we definitely learned that corn's not the same everywhere.
No, it's not. So the dog's been taking up a lot of your energy.
Yeah. And I do have a show coming up in San Antonio in July and August at Dorsal Distillery. And after that, I'll probably just start gearing up for the holidays.
So do you sell a lot in the holiday season?
Yeah, I do okay. During the holiday, when I say holiday season, I guess that starts around, early November for me, because early November is usually when they have the East Austin studio tour. And that's put on by Big Medium. And that's one of those events that's just like it's over 2 weekends, and you can hang your art, your own studio or a venue that you have an agreement with, or, that's on the east side of Austin. Mm-hmm. But I moved down here, and Revival Cycles gave me my first show during East Austin studio tour. And I was like, why would a motorcycle shop want to show artwork? And I'm picturing greasy, long bearded guys with long cigarette ashes. But, Revival Cycles is more like they refurbish old vintage motorcycles and these beautiful machines. And they have, their workshop is pretty spotless. And anyways, I didn't realize how big the event was. And it just kind of gets, a lot of art lovers and appreciators out there visiting studios and buying work, and, some people looking for Christmas gifts, but mostly it's people going out to buy it for their own home. But I would say that that's one of the more special events in Austin when it comes to art and supporting working artists, because it really gets your name in front of a lot of people. So that's always a big show. But yeah, the holidays are always, a good time for me to make stuff and make people happy. And that keeps me going sometimes, knowing how happy people get when they see my stuff,
Now, how do you do with your website? Do you sell pieces off your website regularly?
I do. I have a store section on my website, but, a lot of times I'll post it on Instagram and say, just listed this on the site, or this will be on the site soon, or, people just contact me through Instagram. It's been a pretty valuable tool to sell work. And, it's also a good way to direct people to my website if they're looking, what I have available or whatever. So most of the time it's that when it comes online. Mm-hmm. So in terms of goals, you got the wrestling belt. Any other big pieces that something you want to tackle before you cash in all your chips? Oh yeah. I mean, that's the problem. I have so many ideas that I need to stay busy constantly, and having a puppy is showing me there's other things to life, So I am trying to slow down and just enjoy this time with her and watch her grow. But I really do struggle with how many ideas I have and how many hours in the day there are.
That's great.
It's a good problem to have, but also something I, struggle with. But, it's, just a pile of scrap paper with little ideas scribbled on them, sitting in a pile, just waiting to be tackled. So I do want to start working larger and I do want to do some more abstract pieces. That's where I'm kind of being drawn to right now. Mm-hmm. And
yeah, some of the newer stuff I've seen is really, really cool.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, I'm definitely going to steer everybody towards your Instagram and your website to take a look at it. And
it does mean a lot to me, because I know how much artwork is up there in front of everybody. And I know, like you said, West Palm Beach is full of great art. So, I appreciate hearing that from you.
Yeah. Well, I guess, one of the going back to the whole identity thing, I mean, one of the things I love about music and the arts is that, you know, sometimes, especially with painters, I think, even if you don't see the signature, I mean, they're just certain artists that you look at a piece and you know it's them.
Yeah.
And, you know, and your work is definitely like, it's like that. I mean, you definitely have sort of a trademark look, I would say, you know?
Well, thank you. That's a huge compliment.
Yeah. Yeah. No. And, you know, if I had to describe it, I'd describe it as well, aside from just creative, but fun and outside of the box. And, you know, I mean, it's, you can kind of tell you're self-taught, but not in I don't mean that as a slight in any way at all. I mean, it just, it comes out a different way than like a classically trained artist, you know, it just comes out differently.
Thank you. I take that as a compliment. I never take that as an insult because, you know, in the art world, it is, some people look at self-taught as, you know, oh, I dismiss that art automatically. And, you know, that's what I'm trying to, again, be proud of it rather than hide it. Because I was told early on by my mentor in Indianapolis, Ellie Siskind, who recently passed away, and she will be missed. Don't put that on your resume, and don't put that in your art bio, and don't put this because people look at your work differently. And I love Ellie, but I'm just kind of taking my own lead on this one, and I'm going against that because I think it's something to be proud of. And if they want to dismiss it, they can.
Yeah, but you know, I'm sure once you get a head of steam behind you, I mean, you seem like you've done okay. You know, you've definitely found your audience.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, it's awesome.
Very fortunate.
Well, listen, man, I really appreciate you taking the time to do this. And,
yeah, I absolutely, and I really do appreciate you considering me for this because it sounds right up my alley, and I'm actually going to go download some episodes to listen to it out in the studio this week. So
yeah, the one that came out today is actually with an artist friend of mine, who she's an abstract expressionist painter.
Cool.
But you know, and listen to it. She has a really, really interesting life.
Yeah, I will definitely check it out. But
she definitely found her own identity too. And, yeah. So listen, if you know anybody else who you think I'd want to talk to or might want to be on the show, let me know.
Okay. Absolutely.
And you know, this is, you know, it's never an accident the way these things work because, you know, this wasn't really just about art, and it was, you know, you definitely belong on this show.
Oh,
so, yeah. I enjoyed it, and I appreciate it, and I look forward to talking to you again.
Yeah, you too. And if you ever head back to Austin, make sure you keep my number in your phone.
Absolutely. All
right, man. Have a good night.
All right, there you go. Brian Phillips.
People of America.
If you like this episode, please share it with somebody. Leave a rating, review at Apple Podcasts, Podchaser, wherever you listen. I'll take all the love I can get, whatever they let you do there, whether it's like, follow, whatever. Every bit of support helps. You can find the podcast on Amazon, Breaker, Google Podcasts, Listen Notes, Overcast, Pandora, Podbay, Podcast Addict, Radio Public, Spotify, Stitcher, YouTube, and most places where you find podcasts. If you have questions or comments, You can call 561-247-4757 to leave a message. I'd love to hear from you and value any feedback you might have to offer. For early access to newest episodes, as well as unedited interviews and more supplemental content, you can support the show on Patreon. That's patreon.com/thepath-to-authenticity. I want to thank the band Punk Rock Opera, whose music you hear throughout the show. Their songs are used with permission from the artist and under a Creative Commons license. I want to thank the show's sponsors, the Manor and Windrose Recovery. Thank you to Wendy Chen with Equivox. And as always, the Path to Authenticity is proud to support the iSpeak Media Foundation. So got plenty more to come. I have several interviews in the can ready to edit and release that are already available on Patreon. A couple therapists, a sex coach, lots of good stuff. And working on more interviews and more content, more podcasts. Check out the podcast club on Clubhouse. I'm doing rooms all the time. The 20 questions. Starting to do a room every Sunday evening at 7 Eastern. Love to connect with you there. Actually had a conversation this week with a woman who found me through the podcast. She was just searching for podcasts on Apple. Came across me, happens to live in the same county. Was looking for some support with her teenage son. We had a really nice conversation over the phone. That was really cool. Also have some books that I'm going to be giving away, and I'll talk more about that soon. Anyway, check out the website, thepath-to-authenticity.com. Always new stuff coming up there. Follow us on Instagram, Facebook, both at The Path to Authenticity. I value your time, and I appreciate you investing the time in me and in this podcast. Thank you. I hope you have a great week. I hope you enjoyed hearing from Brian. Be nice.
I'll play for you and maybe you'll see. Hey, we need a guitar player.
The Path to Authenticity is powered by Equivox. For digital marketing and web design services, visit equivox.com.